Commentator, and more than a commentator, on matters Asian and on China in particular, both as an academic but also as somebody who's involved in the actual processes of reform and talking about reform in China. So Andrew, first of all, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us. It's been wonderful to have you here at the ANU for the second Crawford Australia Leadership Forum. You've spoken both in a general session but also in the session we had this morning on China's domestic challenges. And obviously it's about China that I'd like to speak. Now, some of the speakers talked about Chinese leadership and other problems, but you spoke in a particularly interesting way on just what you see is happening in China now, the transformational nature of the developments that we're witnessing. And I wonder if, for the benefit of our viewers, you might be able to talk a little about this for me.
Well, first of all, I think one needs to have a long lens of history to understand China. This is the first point. The Chinese bureaucracy is the oldest surviving human institution around. It survived all the emperors, all the changes of regime, foreign invasion, internal decay, etc. And so when you're dealing with the China, you must remember that you're dealing with a very old and adaptable institution. That's point number one. The second point is that China complies with the law of large numbers. It's 1/5 of mankind. And so by the law of large numbers, 1/5 of the world's problems exist in China. And that's the point that I was trying to make. And it's not just that it's 1/5 of China's internal problems, but China's success or failure would affect the rest of the world, and the world's success or failure would affect China. It's just both are too big, and we're all living on one planet Earth. The third point that I would like to make is that because the whole world is going through very major transformative shifts, demography, climate change, technology, geopolitics, the revival of Cold War, etc., and governance. China is evolving with this at a speed and scale that has never, as unprecedented in history, right? For China to move from 100 over place in GDP numbers to number 2 economy in the world in 35, 36 years is unheard of. I mean, even when, long-term history. So this is the biggest transformation that we've seen. And what has happened is that its success can only be explained because the Chinese governance model, whether you like it or not, has been an institutional development, innovation over the old bureaucracy, ability to control the bureaucracy and to be able to have policy objectives and policy outcomes, right? It started with the full modernization in 1979, and it's implemented quite a lot of it, except that the game has changed and the context has changed. And I think that's the process that we need to appreciate. That at the present moment, the Chinese economy, in 30 years became the world's greatest factory. It's the hub of the global supply chain, right? It's not very high value production, but it is still a major production. Anything you can think of these days is, carries that, made in China. But China is now moving from that old investment-based, export-led model towards a knowledge-based, innovation-driven, and consumption-driven model. The best illustration of this is that 4 out of the top global 15 internet platforms are Chinese. And there are some names that are become well known, like Alibaba, but Tencent, Baidu, JD.com transact more electronic e-tailing business than the United States, because their user base is somewhere between 400 to 600 million population, larger than the US population. So these transformations are changing China, changing the mode of governance. The very fact that the CCP allows these entrepreneurs now to have creative destruction you must understand this. These businesses have creative destructions on state-owned enterprises. So the whole game is remarkable, and it's a remarkable march to markets, in spite of the fact that people accuse the leadership of autocracy, etc. But it is a massive commitment towards a market economy, massive commitment to entrepreneurship and innovation, and openness to the world. Now, whether you agree with that is another matter, but that's essentially what the policy objectives are, and we're now looking at the outcomes.
I think analytically, you put your finger one of the things that makes it difficult to approach. On the one hand, you say quite rightly that the Chinese bureaucracy is the oldest bureaucracy in the world, so these vast elements of continuity in China. But at the same time, what is actually happening, what is being undertaken by this very Chinese bureaucracy is absolutely revolutionary. It's something we've never seen in the world before. So that does make it a bit of a challenge. Now, you as somebody, I know that your own background and training is entirely Western oriented, but at the same time, you can draw on Asian tradition as well as, plus your own contemporary involvement in China, your master of Chinese language. From that point of view, what do you think are some of the more obvious mistakes that Western observers of China tend to make?
Westerners tend to look at China from a very theoretical point of view. They love a theory, they love a hypothesis, and they love to put China into a box of that, oh, this fits, this doesn't fit, oh, this is black, this is white. The Chinese system is actually a very complex organic system. Governance works on networks of networks. There's a civil bureaucracy, there's a military bureaucracy. There is a civil society that's transforming very fast, as I mentioned. Religion, Buddhism, even Christianity is gathering as much membership, in China as in anywhere else. So all these things are simultaneously changing China, right? And the very fact that on WeChat one could have wonderful discussions, mostly in Chinese, unfortunately, on policy issues. Belies the traditional way that there is lack of freedom of speech or a discussion in China. The intellectual tradition is very much alive in China, and a lot of the policy debates that you have in the West on climate change, on pollution, on social inequity, all these are being debated very rigorously and very somewhat heatedly, and sometimes the authorities clamp down on this so that it doesn't get out of hand. Put it this way, but it is moving forward.
And clearly, in the last year or so, it is true. I think we have to acknowledge that in some areas there has been a degree of clamping down. On other areas, though, as you say, the debate continues apace, and I'm always struck by the fact that sometimes within the system that you see the most vigorous debate rather than from people outside the system. For instance, in our own ANU contacts with the Chinese system, we look at within the central party schools some of their debates about democratization, the future role of the party, center-province relations. These are all very, very vibrant. Or in China international relations, the contemporary China Institute of Contemporary International Relations, KICA, which belongs to the Ministry of State Security, but within which nevertheless you have very, very vibrant debates and quite meaty arguments about the appropriate role that China should be playing globally. I know we don't have a great deal of time, but ask you to put yourself in the position of Xi Jinping. If you were Xi Jinping, what would be worrying you most? What are the issues that you would be grappling with most of all, do you think?
No, I think the first of all, I can't be and never will be, but I think that's one of the toughest jobs in the world. But I think what he's grappling with is that he genuinely believes that there is a China dream. He genuinely believes that Chinese society can be transformed towards that. And that China dream is not that far different from an American dream or an Australian dream or a Malaysian dream. It is about middle class income, everybody having their jobs, living in a world of peace and security, don't have to deal with terrorism, petty crime, corruption, and all these sort of issues. And I think on that area, other than the absolute freedoms of individuals, etc., which the Chinese feel is relative, I think within his lifetime and probably my lifetime, some progress will be made. Now, how much of that progress? That's a very difficult question.
Well, that's a very interesting point, and obviously, precisely what is involved in the Chinese dream is of increasing importance to all of us, whether we exactly have the same dream or not. The old Chinese expression, 同床异梦, same bed, different dreams, is all very well, but at the same time, Chinese increasingly are talking about peripheral diplomacy, and I think Australia is definitely on the periphery, talking about a community of common destiny. Even without the formulation community of common destiny, it seems to me that China is now so much part of our future, our regional futures, that whether we want it or not, we are going to have, at least to some degree, a common destiny.
Well, we are having common destinies. Look at the children of the top leadership. A lot of them are in ANU or in Harvard, in Stanford, etc. So the young generation thinks very much like the millennials of other nationalities, except that they have Chinese characteristics. And so if one recognizes that, increasing